Salvador versus Honduras with Nicaragua intervening. In this case, before a chamber of the International Court of Justice, El Salvador and Honduras, by a special agreement dated May 24, 1986, requested that the chamber to delimit the land frontier and to determine the legal status of certain islands and waters in the general area of the Gulf of Fonseca. The Gulf, located on the Pacific coast of Central America, is bordered by El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Nicaragua filed an application for permission to intervene in the case on November 17, 1989, pursuant to Article 62 of the Statute of the Court, which permits a state to request intervention if the state considers that it has interests of a legal nature which may be affected by the decision in the case. The decision on the legal situation of the maritime spaces of the Gulf constituted the part of the proceedings where the intervention of Nicaragua had been admitted. Following the argument of El Salvador, the court came to the conclusion that it was not competent to delimit the waters of the Gulf because the special agreement did not contain indications in this sense. According to the agreement, the court had to determine the legal status of the waters of the Gulf on the basis of applicable international law and, insofar as necessary, the General Peace Treaty of 1980 between El Salvador and Honduras. In view of its general characteristics, dimensions, and proportions, the Gulf would today be regarded as a juridical bay in accordance with the Geneva Convention on the Territorial Sea and the Contiguous Zone of 1958 and the Convention on the Law of the Sea of 1982. As a consequence thereof, if the Gulf was a single-state bay, a closing line could be drawn and the waters thereby enclosed and considered as internal waters. However, the Gulf was not a single-state bay, but constituted a so-called historical bay, which is neither defined in the 1958 Convention nor in the Convention in 1982. From this fact, the court concluded that its decision had to be taken on the basis of customary international law. With a 4-to-1 vote, the court affirmed that the Gulf of Fonseca was a case of historic waters, whereby the three coastal states had succeeded to communal sovereignty. In contrast to the frontier delimited on land, the waters of the Gulf had never been divided or otherwise delimited after the independence of the three coastal states. Thus, the communal succession for the three states was a logical consequence of the uti possidetis juris principle with regard to the sovereignty of the Gulf. Finally, the court drew the closing line of the Gulf between Punta de Amapala and Punta Consigina and determined that the special regime of the Gulf did not extend beyond this closing line. The legal status of these waters inside the Gulf were never defined by the court as sui generis, but would be the same as that of internal waters and not of the territorial sea, except for the 3-mile coastal zone of each state. In 1992, a chamber of the International Court of Justice decided the land, island, and maritime frontier dispute of which the Gulf dispute was a part. The ICJ determined that El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua were to share control of the Gulf of Fonseca. El Salvador was awarded the islands of Minguera and Minguerita, while Honduras was awarded El Tigre Islands.